My sister, who recently graduated with a PhD in genetics from Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, is the director of a laboratory attached to Shaukat Khan Memorial Hospital, the largest cancer treatment facility in Pakistan. This Saturday night, she traveled to Islamabad to take the Sunday morning flight to Jordan for a conference. Being out of towners, she and her colleagues decided to go out for dinner, and were barely out the door when they received word of a bomb attack in a restaurant frequented mostly by foreigners. A Turkish woman was killed during the attack. Many others of all nationalities were also wounded. This event shook me. Since November 2007, I've been involved in the international campaign to restore democracy to Pakistan. We've been emboldened by the wave of support for the lawyers' movement in Pakistan from colleagues around the world. Beleaguered family members of victims of enforced disappearances and their supporters in Pakistan chanted, "It's a crumbling wall. Give it one more push," we responded, following their lead, pushing policymakers to demand immediate restoration of the dismissed judges who had taken up the nearly 500 cases of abductions linked with the military dictator's dubious commitment to the United States' newly found passion for establishing a global anti-terrorist regime. Illegal detention of students, teachers, workers, and members of the political opposition by Pakistani intelligence have characterized the Musharraf regime from its inception in 1999, 2 years before the declaration of the War on Terror. 2 years before the declaration of the War on Terror provided the convenient excuse for Pakistan's military to try to keep 160 million people under lock and key. Meanwhile, honor killings and atrocities against women and religious minorities have intensified at the country's frontiers, particularly since the Pakistani administration's decision to cede political control to tribal leaders in exchange for cooperation in capturing Taliban operatives in the region. Needless to say, the United States was an initial supporter of this failed tactic of courting armed tribesmen and combating terrorists, one it has since reproduced in Iraq, particularly in the frontier province of Al-Anbar. As we consult with lawyers and firms in the United States, we must bear in mind that these officials cannot be tried in the International Criminal Court in the frontier province of Al-Anbar. As we consult with lawyers and firms in the United States, we must bear in mind that these officials cannot be tried in the International Criminal Court, since Pakistan, like the US, is not signatory to the Rome Statute. The similarity is not coincidental. Since the September 11th attacks, the passage of anti-terrorism legislation in the United States has allowed President George Bush and his cabinet to order the indefinite detention of suspected terrorists by the CIA and military. This has occurred with little judicial oversight. In other countries similarly perceived to be under threat of Islamist terrorists, the context for such legislation has been mired by charges of political opportunism. These charges issued from the extrajudicial powers of detainment and interrogation it provides to members of the police, intelligence forces, military, and top executive officials. In Pakistan, the targeting of political opponents, together with religious and ethnic minorities by intelligence agencies and members of the police, culminated in a power struggle between the judiciary and President Pervez Musharraf. Together with the targeted assassination of Benazir Bhutto on December 27, 2007, barely 2 weeks passed before the parliamentary elections. The dismissal of many of Pakistan's Supreme Court and High Court judges on November 3rd gave rise to agitation by diverse segments of Pakistan's civil society. Of particular concern were the 485 cases of enforced disappearance that the Supreme Court had scheduled to hear on November 11th. As Pakistan's head of state since 1999, Pervez Musharraf is responsible for the tens of thousands of warrantless arrests, detentions, and secret acts of torture. Pakistani police, military, and intelligence agencies carried out these acts, while a brutal war between the people of Balochistan and the Pakistani army reached genocidal levels. By uniting the constitutional and legislative legacy of his civilian predecessors with a personal arsenal of intelligence agencies and Bush administration's monetary and logistical aid, President Musharraf has been able to create an anti-terrorist regime that allows for extrajudicial arrests of political dissidents and their rendition to detainment facilities outside of Pakistan. Moreover, his now discarded role as head of the Pakistani military, a key player in Pakistani politics, has allowed him to buy legitimacy at the point of a gun, each time he could not secure it through other means. This attempt to remove any trace of liability for his wresting of executive power from elected civilian governments, accomplished through his suspension of the country's constitution, is an act of treason under that mutilated constitution. Barely 2 months ago, President Musharraf handed over his position as Chief of Army Staff to General Ishfaq Parvez Kayani, a former Director General of the Inter-Services Intelligence, a feared intelligence agency directed by the Pakistan military. As Chief of Army Staff, General Kayani holds primary responsibility for all detentions and acts of torture committed by the military and intelligence forces operating under his command, as well as for the law enforcement personnel responsible for detaining and torturing Pakistani nationals. As head of the ISI between 2004 and 2007, he and Ijaz Shah, Chief of Intelligence Bureau during the same time, are also directly responsible for the majority of abductions of civilians during that period. In December 2005, Mr. Shah warned Dr. Amna Buttar, an American citizen who served as an interpreter for rape victim Mukhtar Maid during Mukhtar's campaign period. In December 2005, Mr. Shah warned Dr. Amna Buttar, an American citizen who served as an interpreter for rape victim Mukhtar Maid during Mukhtar's campaign in the US. He said, "We can do anything. We can just pay a little bit of money to some black guys in New York and get people killed there." Today, he's responsible for the detention of all the judges held under house arrest in Islamabad. Sayyid Kamal Shah, who currently holds the position of Internal Secretary, was Inspector General Sindh Police in 2004 and oversaw the extrajudicial arrest of 12 members of a Shia sect following the Nishtar Park bombing in Karachi, as well as countless other such detentions. These detentions include abductions of religious minorities, including Sindhi Hindus, for specious terrorism charges. As Chief Minister of the Sindh during the same period, Arbab Ghulam Rahim is also directly implicated in these abductions. I'm fearful for the lives and welfare of my family members overseas, including my sister. However, our effort must continue. In 2006, Mrs. Amna Janjua, whose husband has been missing since December 2005, started a bold initiative called Defense of Human Rights, an organization that was instrumental in forcing a reluctant Supreme Court to take up the cases of enforced disappearances in Pakistan. With no recourse in Pakistan since Pervez Musharraf dismissed that court last November, Mrs. Janjua and others traveled to Lahore on March 7th and issued an ultimatum to Pakistani officials to release the names of all those held without charge by Pakistani authorities. We cannot leave these courageous families rudderless as the Pakistani politicians who won last month's elections waffle over when, how, and in what form to restore democratic values to Pakistan. The international community can and must exercise the limited set of options opened up by the precedent set by Spanish Judge Baltasar Garzón when he issued an arrest warrant against Chilean dictator Auguste Pinochet, and by the British government decision to validate the rule of law and carry out Pinochet's arrest. Canadian courts are empowered to try individuals from countries that are beyond the stated jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. Germany, Spain, and other European courts claim universal jurisdiction for certain particularly heinous crimes. Just about any law firm in the U.S. may try and convict foreign nationals in U.S. courts under the Alien Torts Act. Courts can demand banks to freeze or seize assets belonging to foreign nationals for pressing concerns relating to national security. Our campaign has taken the first step towards our goal to hold the high-ranking Pakistani officials mentioned above accountable for the horrors that have occurred under their watch. We have established contact with families of 10 victims of these abductions to gather information pertaining to their disappearance. In the next few weeks, we will release a report detailing our progress. In the meantime, we urge you to help us keep this issue alive. Thank you.